Então, boa tarde. Eu sou a Ana Gloglowski, eu sou, como é que se diz? Eu recomendo filmes para o festival já há muitos anos, desde 2003 que eu venho colaborando, e é um prazer. O Amir me pediu para moderar esse encontro com pessoas importantes do mundo dos festivais internacionais. E, para mim, é a melhor profissão do mundo, dirigir um festival de cinema. Não há nada mais bonito, mais agradável, mais entusiasmante do que partilhar com o público os filmes que a gente gosta, e que a gente gostou, e dos quais a gente pode falar. E, ainda por cima, o festival é um lugar em que há realmente um momento de comunhão entre uma tela, o público e o encontro que, principalmente, o documentário proporciona. Então, obrigada, Amir, por me propor de falar aqui. Eu não vou falar muito, eu vou só apresentar os nossos convidados, que são ilustres, importantes, têm cada um uma experiência única para poder partilhar com a gente. E a gente vai se organizar da seguinte maneira: cada um vai contar um pouco o seu percurso, a história do festival, e tentar analisar, de uma certa maneira, desses últimos 20 anos, desde que o Tudo Verdade existe, que realmente tem sido uma maneira de proporcionar um conhecimento do documentário brasileiro e também da evolução do próprio país, de que maneira o documentário brasileiro interfere, ou, em todo caso, existiu ou existe ainda e vai existir nesses festivais internacionais. Estão aqui ao meu lado Ali Derks, que é diretora fundadora do IDFA, International Documentary Festival of Amsterdam, que é, como disse o Amir ontem, o Cannes, o Festival de Cannes do documentário. Quando você vai a Amsterdã, parece que ninguém vai a nenhum outro lugar sem assistir um filme durante o festival. A cidade está ocupada por festivaleiros, né, com isso pendurado, procurando onde é uma sala, onde é outra. É uma sensação, é uma cidade de mais ou menos 800 mil habitantes, e parece que todo mundo vai ao IDFA. E a gente se sente assim bem, porque está ali e está compartilhando com os outros. Thom, que é um curador americano e que é responsável pela seleção não ficção do Festival de Toronto, que é o maior festival de cinema do continente norte-americano, e que é no outono no Canadá. E ele vai contar também outras experiências. Ele também dirige o Doc New York, que é um festival mais recente. E ele também tem um blog, enfim, ele vai mostrar para vocês, vai haver imagens para contar para vocês o trabalho dele mais recente e mais antigo. E temos também a Haruka Hama, que veio do Japão. Ela está baseada no escritório de Tóquio do Festival de Yamagata, que é o maior festival de documentário do Japão. Eu nem sei se existem outros, mas eu penso que é um festival muito importante. E ela é curadora também da secção internacional do festival, e ela vai preparar para a próxima edição uma mostra do documentário latino-americano. Então, vamos começar pela Ali, que vai nos contar um pouco como é que, esses 20 anos, como é que o festival evoluiu, o Festival IDFA, como é que o festival evoluiu, e como é que, de uma certa maneira, eu sei que quase todos os anos tem um documentário, pelo menos um documentário brasileiro no IDFA, como é que ela vê a presença do cinema brasileiro, do documentário brasileiro, nesse âmbito internacional. Ali, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. And first of all, Amir, congratulations with your 20th anniversary. And thank you for having me here, and my husband, Bob. I'm very, very grateful to you. And I do think that this festival is so important for Brazilian documentaries, not only Brazilian documentaries, but also Latin American documentaries. It's through you that I got to know the Brazilian filmmakers and their work much better and understand it much better as well. We in the past, IDFA it's a huge festival. It's really big. Last year we sold around 250,000 tickets in 10 days, which is crazy when you think about it, because the rest of the year people will not go to documentaries. It's only during this festival that the cinemas are packed. I don't know why. Because the same titles might travel through the Netherlands after the festival, but people just don't go. In the past, the IDFA is not only a festival, we also run a foundation. Can you put the website on, Thom?
Here we go.
Okay. We are not only running a festival, we do a lot of things throughout the year. And one of them is a fund that we are running. It's called the IDFA Bursa Fund, formerly known as the Jan Vrijman Fund. And the IDFA Bursa Fund supports documentary filmmakers in developing countries. We did support a lot of Brazilian documentaries as well in the past. Now you're not considered a poor developing country anymore, so I'm very sorry that I cannot support you any longer. But anyway, we did support, for example, some of Robert Berliner's films, The Three Blind Ladies, and some other films as well, and we show them then always at our festival as well. IDFA is a gathering not only of because for me it's difficult to talk about a lot of Brazilian films. I think Amir is much more qualified to do that. We do have every year some Brazilian documentaries in the festival, and then the directors always come with canchacha, which I really appreciate, I have to admit. And then we have a lot of caipirinha parties as well during IDFA. It's not only a gathering of audience and directors. We are running a huge pitching session. It's called the Forum. The Forum, in 3 days' time, directors from all over the world pitch their projects in front of all the finances, commissioning editors that really matter, decision makers. So I'm talking about HBO, but also Nippon Television, the Chinese television, ZDF, Arte, BBC, they're all there. And it's very important because in 3 days, 60 films will be pitched, and they decide on the spot whether they're going to finance your film, yes or no. To apply for the forum, it's possible for you all, if you're a filmmaker or a student, you can apply for the forum, check out this card, or go to our website where you will find all the information. The same is for, I don't know, are there many students here in the audience?
Couple hands, but
A couple, yeah. You know, for the students, we also have a very, very interesting program during the festival, which is called the IDFA Academy. In 4 days' time, you will meet a lot of professionals from all around the world, producers, directors. You'll go to master classes, you'll meet commissioning editors, you'll meet financiers, and we really, it's a kind of tailor-made program almost. So if you are interested, please apply for the IDFA Academy and come to Amsterdam. You'll meet all your colleague students from all over the world, and you will become friends for the rest of your life. I'm quite sure of that. And for students as well, we have a summer academy. It's the IDFA Summer Academy, which is in June. I think you can still apply for it this year if you have a rough cut or you have a script or film plan, as we used to say, for documentaries.
it says entry is now closed on
Oh,
your
is it
website.
closed? Oh, he finds out it's closed. Okay, for next year. But then it's really interesting. Also, that is a tailor-made program. You come with your rough cut or script, and we invite really talented master script doctors and editors from all over the world, and they are really very, very good, and they will help you with with editing and with developing your film plan. So for students, please come. If you have a ready-made film already and you're not accepted for the festival, don't be disappointed, because it's a tough selection. We get over 3,500 entries per year, and only like new films, around 120, 130 will be accepted for IDFA. if you're not accepted, don't be disappointed, because it is a tough competition. On the other hand, we have a Docs for Sale market. You can enter your film to Docs for Sale. You pay a little bit of money, but then your film will be online, and there are commissioning editors and buyers from all over the world who will see your film online, and they're obliged to react on your film, whether they like it or not, whether they think it should be re-edited or whatever. So, and that's not only a physical market during the festival, because then we have all these video booths or small computers where people and the buyers see the films, but it's online throughout the whole year. It's behind a decoder, so you don't have to be afraid that somebody will steal your film or copy it. It's worthwhile. I know that a lot of sales have been done throughout our Docs for Sale online. Let me see. I think I don't want to talk too long. I think at the end there's some room for questions and answers. But I would love to show out you something else that we have online. Online you see IDFA TV, and there are a lot of films that are online. It's still under construction. We have to add much more films on the international side, but it's difficult with rights, of course. So, but we're trying to organize that. And also on our website you will find all the master classes that we did in the past, or the industry panels. For example, last year we had an industry panel where Bill Nichols, the writer of great documentary books about documentaries, he gave a master class of 2 hours. It's all online, but also Victor Kozakowski gave a master class, Riti Pan, Errol Morris, Werner Herzog. They're all there. So if you want to, the quality is not the best, I have to admit, but the sound is okay. You can understand what they're saying and what they're talking about. I just wanted to, yesterday I went through my website and I found a film that we supported long time ago with the Jan Vrijman Fund, now the IDFA Bertha Fund. And it's called Black Against White. It's about a soccer match, football match here in Sao Paulo. And I just want to show you, because otherwise we're talking all the time, 3 or 4 minutes of this film. It's a Brazilian film supported by us.
Thom, então, eu passo a palavra para você nos contar pouco a diversidade das áreas em que você atua para valorizar o documentário.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a few different festivals and outlets where I curate for, and I've got a bunch of web pages here that you can see, and since I'll only be able to talk a little bit about each one, I hope you have a chance to go and explore them yourselves more later. The Toronto Film Festival, which is now in its 40th year, I've been there for the last 10. It takes place in September. We show about 270 feature-length films of all kinds, mainly fiction, and of those we show anywhere from 30 to 40 documentaries each year. The main documentary section is called TIFF Docs. That's the page I have open right now, and these are some of the films that we showed at last year's festival last September. So there are about 18 programmers at the Toronto Film Festival. Most of the programmers have regional specialties. My colleague Diana Sanchez for over 10 years has covered Latin America as her regional specialty, and then we have an Asian programmer and a Middle East programmer. And so forth. Rather than having a regional specialty, my specialty is a documentary specialty, and I am in kind of constant communication with my fellow programmers as they travel to places that I'm not getting to communicate back to me what they're seeing and hearing. So we probably get about 500 documentary submissions a year, and to show roughly about 35 or so. In addition to the TIFF Docs section, we have a section called Wavelengths, which is for more experimental film that is curated by my colleague Andrea Picard. And so, those of you who are doing more experimental work, I'd suggest you take a look at that. So in addition to the Toronto Film Festival in September, 6 years ago, my wife and I started a film festival in New York City, where we're based, called DOCNYC. It takes place just about a week before Allie's wonderful festival in Amsterdam. It lasts 8 days. We're now showing getting close to 100 feature-length documentaries at DocNYC. And you can explore the website at docnyc.net to see a little bit more what we do there. And then my winter vacation is programming at the Miami International Film Festival, which just took place last month in March. Certainly the Miami Film Festival has a strong interest and representation of Latin American cinema, including Brazilian cinema. Some of the films that we showed this year include Invasion from Panama, Life is Sacred, which is a co-production between a Danish filmmaker and Colombian filmmakers. Let's see, there was Tea Time, which is playing here from Chile, and in fact won the...
Funded by the Jan Vrijman Fund.
There we go. Won the audience prize at Miami this year. So, I think that every festival, particularly regional festivals, which I would include Miami, pay kind of close attention to who their audiences are. And in Miami, our audience has a strong Latin American representation, so that's why those films get a greater purchase there. Online, I curate a site called Sundance Now Doc Club. So this is a kind of like a boutique Netflix only for documentaries. It's a subscription video on demand site. You can subscribe to it anywhere in the world. I have to say that the library that's available outside of the U.S. is a much smaller library than what's available in the U.S. But for one of the things that you can reach outside the U.S., the collection I'm proud of is this Drew Associates collection, 10 films made by some of the pioneers of American documentary, Robert Drew, Ricky Leacock, D.A. Pennebaker, Albert Maysles. Many of these films had never really been available in public before, including the great documentary Jane about Jane Fonda, made by D.A. Pennebaker, and a kind of overlooked female documentary pioneer named Hope Ryden. This is, I think, indicative of the way a lot of documentary consumption is moving. It's moving online. We're trying to create bigger and bigger libraries for what's available, and it's one of the things that we're discovering now as we try to grow the library of films that we put on Sundance Now Doc Club is what rights are available, what materials are available. I think that there is there's an important conversation to be had about documentary history and the films that aren't available to us. Just 2 weeks ago in New York City, we held a documentary preservation summit, a 2-day conference to talk about those things. I'm just going to say a couple of other things, and I'll pass it back to you, Anna. But since part of this conversation is about what are films that stand out internationally, and how do Brazilian films and Latin American films fit into that scheme, it got me thinking about Sight and Sound magazine did this poll last summer on the greatest documentaries of all time. They polled, I think, around 270 filmmakers and critics. Amir, I think you contributed to that amongst others. Lists like this are always meant to be debated, but it's an interesting starting point for the conversation of what are the films that rise to the top of this conversation. In response to that, the filmmaker Mark Cousins, an Irish filmmaker who lives in Scotland these days, and Mark is perhaps best known for his 15-hour history of film called The Story of Film that I highly recommend. It's a terrific international spectrum of filmmaking. Mark had said to me a couple years ago, he said, that's the last thing I'm going to do on the history of filmmaking. I don't want to do another film about film, but I'm happy to say that he's already gone back on that promise, and in response to the Sight and Sound poll, he's begun this film, which he was calling Dear John Grierson. I think that title might change, and he's reacting to the kind of Western-centric canon of documentary film, and Mark says in his essay that accompanies this is that there are great filmmakers from regions of the world, great documentaries that aren't in circulation, that we don't even know the names of the filmmakers, and he put together this 20-minute rough cut that is really thrilling to watch, I think. So what else do I have here? Well, that's something else. So anyways, I'll leave it off there and we can discuss other topics if you wish.
Agora eu vou passar a palavra para a Haruka do Japão, que vai nos dizer em algumas palavras o que é a Yamagata, como é que a Yamagata tem evoluído e o que já que ela vai fazer uma retrospectiva sobre cinema latino-americano, o que ela poderia dizer sobre o lugar do cinema documentário brasileiro nessa aventura. Obrigada.
Good afternoon, and thank you for warm introduction for me, Anna, and thank you, Amin. It's very nice to meet you here in São Paulo, because it's first time to come to here in Brazil for me. And I'd like to introduce about Yamagata, because it's so far away, and then also our festival is biennale, so we are very slow, and I'd like to go back to the story of Yamagata since 1989. The IDFA was started as Asia's first international documentary film festival in Yamagata, and the festival has been held biennally ever since in Yamagata's best season, October. Yamagata is located in northeastern Japan. It's 3 hours by bullet train. The festival started as an event to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the city of Yamagata, the sponsor at that time. And now, since 2007, and the festival becomes non-profit organization. And now we have both office in Yamagata and Tokyo, we're working together. And the festival is very intimate, and we are very spontaneous. I'd like to introduce such an intimacy of the festival through our clip and the short trailer. Could you play the DVD, please? Thank you. And this clip actually is originally made in 2003, and we still continue to use same images, so you can find very old faces of the filmmakers. Yeah. Anyway, and as one of the reasons of such intimacy, it was in the spirit of that documentarist Ogawa Shinsuke, I think, who passed away in 1992, spearheaded the organization of the festival, of the first festival. And Ogawa Shinsuke is one of the most important documentary filmmakers in Japan, who lived in Yamagata his last 30 years and played a key role in creation of the festival and strove to facilitate exchange between Asian documentaries. From the time of his earliest films about the Narita airport protests in the 1960s to 70s, to his last works produced in Yamagata, Ogawa encouraged filmmakers around Asia to devote their energy to making meaningful documentaries. And Ogawa, in 1989, for the first edition of the festival, Ogawa spearheaded a major symposium on Asian documentary, probably the first gathering of independent filmmakers from the region. It was happening because no Asian documentary was shown at international competition at that time. But the festival invited some filmmakers and the critic from Asia for the special program. And then Ogawa was moved by their stories, which all involved various political, economic, and artistic struggles. Ogawa immediately started creating relationship with neighboring filmmakers like China, Taiwan, Philippines, and India. And these seeds are planting all over Asia, and the Yamagata becomes well-known and important place for Asian documentary filmmakers. The reason for it being a magnet for independent filmmakers are simple. Until recently, the week-long IDFA Yamagata was one of the few film festivals in Asia devoted exclusively to the documentary form. Its scope, however, reaches beyond simply screening recent, groundbreaking work in the international competition. And feature-length 15 documentaries selected from all over the world for the international competition. And they are selected by unique selection committee. Now it's consisted of about 10 members. The film festival staff, film critic, general film goers, and citizens in Yamagata. And also we have another important program called New Asian Currents. The Asian Showcasing Program, but competition program, introducing emerging filmmakers from across Asia, has over the years become one of the festival's vibrant centers of attention as a meeting place of raw, youthful energy. In honor of dedicated filmmaker Ogawa Shinsuke, the Ogawa Shinsuke Prize has established in 1993 to provide encouragement to young Asian documentarists. And after the screening of the festival, the screening material of the festival will preserved at Yamagata Documentary Film Library, and we loan those films for non-profit screenings under the contract with filmmakers, except works belongs to Japanese distributors. By featuring special events and programs shedding light on the history and the diversity of filmmaking, the Yamagata is working hard to create a new forum for the production of alternative, independent, non-fiction film and the discussion of documentary as a form of expression. So, since the beginning, volunteers of the festival play huge and warm role everywhere during the festival. In 2013, the last edition of the festival, we had 390 volunteers from all over Japan and the world. The Korean club, I showed from you can see in the clip, is a place to get together during the festival period. It's run with the cooperation with Japanese restaurant Korean and the volunteer organization. The Korean club is open from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. to festival guests, participants, and the local community. So it has become an indispensable part of the festival now. Besides the period of the festival, we organize several activities like regular screenings every 2 weeks in Yamagata, and play event, post event of the festival, cinema workshop for children, and also started March 11 documentary film archive on the website in Japanese and English. March 11 documentary film archive collects catalogs, preserves, and provides access to documentary films and related materials about the Great East Japan earthquake of March 11, 2011. we hope the Yamagata will always provide a fruitful and enjoyable gathering place for filmmakers and participants from abroad and for the citizens of Yamagata City. This is an introduction of the Yamagata. Yeah, thank you.
Bom, em relação ao que foi dito, Ali, eu moro na França e tem havido um grande debate a respeito do que você chamou documentário criativo e o impacto da televisão na linguagem do documentário, digamos, chamado criativo. O que você poderia dizer sobre isso nos anos que decorreram, esses 20 últimos anos, se você acha que houve uma modificação do documentário influenciado pela televisão, ou se o IDFA continua sendo um lugar onde você vê o que não se vê na televisão, pelo menos numa das secções competitivas. Como é que a gente pode analisar o que na França hoje em dia é um verdadeiro conflito, que já foi para os jornais, e como é que você vê essa evolução e, portanto, como é que você vê a evolução do próprio documentário em relação a esse, enfim, esse enorme parceiro ou inimigo que é a televisão em relação ao documentário?
Yeah, of course, television has a huge influence on the form of documentary. I remember starting in 1988 that the whole documentary genre was almost non-existing anymore. But then, because of all these thematical channels that all of a sudden came, like the National Geographic, CNN, Natural History, all of a sudden the television stations needed content. Not necessarily the kind of content that I like or that we like as a festival, but of course it had an enormous influence because all of a sudden there was a kind of market for documentary filmmakers to get their films being shown. And of course technology changed a lot as well. And the first thing that we noticed when we started the forum in 1992, that was the format. The television really, all over the world, they really asked for films that were between 50 and 60 minutes, like 52 and 58 minutes, and it had all to do with commercial breaks, etc. And of course it has an enormous impact on the form of documentary. And it's like saying to Rembrandt, you have to make a painting and it's only 20 square meters or so, you know. I do think that a story that needs as long as it needs to be told. You know, it can be 3 hours, it can be 6 hours, like Shoah, for example. It can only also be 2 minutes, like little poetic films called The Tulip, which is from the 60s. But so what we really try to do, and that is not because we oppose television so much, because on the other hand, financially, we also depend on them. Because that is where we see the most documentaries. But what we really try to do is to try to fund and sponsor and show the documentary films that are not typically television format. The length, okay, we do have a section which is called the mid-length competition, and they're all films between like 45 minutes and an hour. But these are the films that are not what I would call regular television. And we really try to be more creative in that way. For filmmakers, of course, it's tough. Because you are forced in a kind of mold. You have to listen to what the BBC wants or ZDF wants. But what happens at IDFA very often as well is that we get two copies of a film. One is the director's cut and one is the television cut. And the director's cut is usually 80, 90 minutes, and of course the television cut is 58 minutes. And to be honest, it is not necessarily true that the longer film or the director's cut is better than a television cut, because I do still think that a lot of documentaries are a little bit too long. But so what I'm trying to say here is we need the television, we need their money and their broadcasting possibilities. Well, just to make documentaries, but as a filmmaker, I think you should all be very, very critical towards where the money comes from, and you should defend your own story, and you have to defend the way you want to tell the story. On the other hand, it's not necessarily true that all the commissioning editors are assholes. Absolutely not. They're really very, very qualified commissioning editors that work for television stations around the world. But that doesn't count for every country, I think. It is the technology changed so much as well. You know, nowadays, it's not only television, it's also your telephone. I mean, there are a lot of films, documentaries, short documentaries made for your mobile, documentaries made only for the internet. We at IDFA, for example, one section which is called Doc Lab, and it's all about cross-media and the films really made for the internet. And I do see young people really going to the internet, not even necessarily television anymore, but to the internet to see and go to the interactive documentaries. And probably that is also part of the future. And even last year, it's funny, not talk about television, but for the first time in my life, I had this virtual reality documentary experience. So I had these ocular things on my head, and it was funny. It's really so amazing. I was in a room with a singer-songwriter. I was watching him. He was playing the piano, and I could look around in his room and what kind of books he had on the shelf, and there was a little dog on the floor. And really, how stupid can you be? I know I'm in a virtual reality situation, but I really, I wanted to pet, to strike, say that, to pet the dog, like. So that is also the future that will happen. That you, it was not Mick Jagger I was with in the room. It was another singer-songwriter. But I really, I loved that experience. So I think it's not even television where the future is. It's that. It's everything online.
Thom, a minha pergunta para você seria uma prolongação dessa explicação. Talvez, como é que você separa os filmes em função dos festivais ao qual você participa? Isso tem alguma coisa a ver com uma linha editorial diferente, um público diferente, um meio de comunicação diferente? Como é que e se essa programação tem sido modificada, ou se ela como é que ela evoluiu nesses últimos 20 anos?
Well, I'd say that there are, depending on what I'm programming for, I have some different goals in mind. So at the Toronto Film Festival, I'm not sure if we get the computer back up on the screen there. The Toronto Film Festival, part of what it does is it's a launching pad for the North American marketplace. So that includes some of the bigger, more artistically minded Hollywood films like a Gravity. It includes international art house cinema, say like the work of the Dardenne brothers. And when it comes to documentaries, we're paying close attention to the kinds of documentaries that we think are going to go far and reach larger audiences. So this year, for instance, that included The Look of Silence, Joshua Oppenheimer's follow-up to The Act of Killing. It included the film Red Army, a very strong film about the Soviet hockey team. Seymour, an Introduction, a beautiful new film directed by the actor Ethan Hawke. Sunshine Superman, a terrific film about the pioneers of base jumping. And then, something else that we're looking to do, with a different mission than paying attention to what might go far in the with audiences, is paying attention to an international spectrum of cinema, both old masters and new voices. So when I think of new voices, I think of this filmmaker from the Congo, Diodo Hamadi, and this really wonderful film he made called National Diploma, or another film that actually wound up winning the Audience Prize for documentary at Toronto, film from Sudan called The Beats of Antonov. So, those are some of the things on our mind when we're programming for Toronto.
Can I ask
Yes.
something, Thom? Because today I got an email from the Toronto Film Festival. There was they published that you start television series now being programmed at the Toronto Festival, and I think that was mainly aimed at fiction. But will you do that for documentaries as well?
Yeah, following up on what Ali was saying before about changing formats, I think we're at a time when formats are in a big transition mode. So you have the short-form documentaries, which have new outlets like they never had before. You see old media companies like the New York Times that I have on behind me, that for the last 2 or 3 years has been going very deep into short-form documentaries. The Guardian newspaper published out of London has followed suit. Condé Nast Publications that publishes magazines like Vanity Fair and The New Yorker, they have a new short film division. So, 5 years ago, I would say if you were a documentary maker making a short film, you were probably only doing it as a calling card to show what you can do. Now there's really outlets for it. Getting back to your question, Ali, about different formats and television, I think we're going to be seeing a larger trend in serialized documentaries. The one I have up behind me right now, The Staircase. I think you probably showed The Staircase at IDFA. Is a 10-part kind of murder mystery documentary. Just last month in the U.S., a big phenomenon on HBO was a serialized documentary called The Jinx. And there was also a very big audio podcast documentary called Serial. And these things are generating a lot of interest, and it kind of follows suit with the way in which we're consuming other television. We're not watching one-off TV shows. We're watching 15 hours of a Breaking Bad or The Wire or what have you. Yes. So at a festival level for Toronto, we're absolutely paying attention to that, and this year, for instance, at the Sundance Film Festival, they screened the first 2 episodes of The Jinx. So I think everyone in the festival world recognizes that there are new and interesting things happening on television, different than what was happening just 5 or 10 years ago, and we want to be taking note of that.
E o trabalho que você faz no online, que é também uma espécie de mini festival online, qual é a diferença a nível da programação? Qual é a sua intenção? É só retrospectivas ou você também tenta iniciar filmes que talvez não teriam lugar em Toronto ou em Nova York para colocar online? Em função de público diferente que está assistindo internet para ver cinema, mais do que se deslocar para ir ao cinema.
Well, there's, speaking just about Sundance Now, Doc Club, we curate different collections of films. So, one thing we've done is we've had, people with who have followings from other worlds, like Susan Sarandon, curate a collection of her favorite documentaries. We have the radio host, Ira Glass, who does the show This American Life. He did one, and we're going to have a lot more of that. There's Ira's. So, I think it's, this is a relatively new terrain, and I would say, goal number 1 is to get as many of the most interesting films, documentaries that we can on, and I think as it progresses, we'll probably be commissioning new work. But I think, so that's just talking about the platform that I curate. I would say, an important trend for all filmmakers to take note of is the new technology that's available for you to be selling your own films off of your own websites. So here's a company, VHX TV, and I would say another one that's active in this space is Vimeo.com. This gives you the ability to embed a film on your own website, charge the price that you want for it, and and ultimately, allow you as filmmakers to build a direct relationship with your audience.
É uma competição com os festivais, afinal, quase. É uma oferta fantástica, mas ao mesmo tempo tem um certo lado de competitivo com os festivais. O que você acha? Yeah.
You're asking me?
Well, both of you, yeah.
In the end, of course, it's very important that you can upload your film online and people see it around the world, but I do still think, and I strongly believe, that a festival is so important that you have an experience together. You watch the films together, the director is there, the director is physically there, you can ask him questions after the screening, and of course, I do think when you're a director, you want to be in touch with your audience. And of course, you can be in touch online, but it's like with sex. Sex online is not interesting. You want to have the real thing.
Como o Festival de Yamagata acontece de 2 em 2 anos, como é que o festival acompanha essas modificações tecnológicas tão rápidas, que estão modificando também a relação do público com o cinema?
I think in these 10 years, it's the changing of technologies very, very quickly. And after the appearance of the video camera, it's changed. I think it has been changed because of that equipment. But Yamagata, it's as I mentioned before, Yamagata is very slow, and then even for this edition of the festival, we started to think about to project with the DCP as of first year. Because we are using City Hall, public space for the international competition, so we can't afford to use DCP, mobile DCP projector because it's expensive. So we are learning from the other festivals, maybe from IDFA or other European Western film festivals, how they do adapt with the new technology. So, but we like to present good system and then environment to show the films as it is original. So, I don't know if it could be answer for you. Yeah.
Thank you. Antes de passar a palavra a vocês, porque vocês talvez tenham perguntas, no IDFA houve uma retrospectiva do João Salles, houve uma retrospectiva do Coutinho, o Robertinho Berliner apresentou filmes, enfim, todos os anos tem havido filmes brasileiros. Eu gostaria de perguntar à Ali se ela tem a sensação, porque a televisão, justamente no Brasil, não mostra documentário, e se ela tem a sensação que os filmes brasileiros são diferentes, se eles estão mudando, se eles estão chegando prontos, estão ocupando um lugar de prestígio no cinema europeu, documentário. Como é que ela poderia ter um olhar assim para o passado, já que ela conhece muito bem o documentário brasileiro, pelo menos através dos grandes nomes desse cinema?
I think it's such a pity that Brazilian television doesn't show enough documentaries. You know, it's we were just talking with Jonathan about it. Like documentaries nowadays, you learn more from them than from the news. You know, the news is like sound bites. Within 1 minute, it's gone, and you forget about it, and it's not really thought through. But when you see a lot of documentaries, I've just mentioned Berliner's film about the three blind ladies. You learn so much about this country. João Salles, for example, who came to Amsterdam and for his masterclass in Amsterdam, he told a lot about Brazilian documentaries that I think you've never seen because you don't get the opportunity here to see them on television. I've been trying to get the Brazilian television into the forum because when the television is there and when they will invest in documentaries from abroad, it's all about co-financing in the end, then they would also feel obliged to show more documentaries at their own television station. The good news is that since 2 years, we are invited every year. Raul goes to a television showcase in Rio de Janeiro, where I don't know which broadcaster it is, you might probably know, Amir, but he did try to show us the best documentaries of Brazil. But I noticed that they're not the same films that are being shown here. Probably, I don't know. Oh, mic for Amir.
Só breve comentário. No Brasil, a gente não tem a televisão aberta passando documentários. Isso é verdade, isso é fato. Mas assim como a televisão a cabo, pay-per-view, os canais a cabo, tem se aberto muito para o documentário. Então, o quadro é um pouco diferente desse que a Ana acabou de traçar. O É Tudo Verdade, o festival, por exemplo, mantém há 11 anos um programa semanal de documentários brasileiros, em que a gente exibe um documentário de longa-metragem inédito por semana. Outras TVs têm começado a fazer isso aqui também no Brasil, canais por assinatura. Então, isso é uma tendência. O que a gente não está, uma tradição europeia, sobretudo, interessante, que a gente não tem no Brasil, é que o canal Brasil à parte, que é o canal que mantém com a gente essa parceria para fazer o It's All True na televisão, o canal Brasil tem sim esse produzido, pelo menos 5 ou 6 produzidos diretamente, 5 ou 6 documentários por ano. A televisão brasileira raramente participa da produção de documentários. Então, por exemplo, essa omissão histórica da televisão brasileira frente ao fórum em Amsterdã se deve a isso. Eles não coproduzem, a televisão brasileira raramente coproduz documentários e produzir documentários é mais raro ainda. Eu acho que a melhor exceção no momento é o Canal Brasil. Agora, outros canais, por exemplo, um canal ligado à Globo, que é a Globo News, começou a ter um slot de documentários. Eles estão começando a passar documentários e produzir filmes, por enquanto, de profissionais ligados ao canal, não de produtores independentes, né? Mas alguma coisa começa a mudar também nesse cenário. Mas, tradicionalmente, a televisão brasileira teve, nos anos 70, uma relação mais próxima com a produção independente, com o Globo Repórter, com a TV Cultura e tudo, e depois disso se afastou e, de fato, é uma relação bastante diferente da realidade europeia, por exemplo. Obrigado. Já que eu estou com o microfone, posso fazer uma pergunta? Eu queria perguntar para o Thom, que teve uma experiência que acho que é muito pioneira e pega parte do trabalho que nós 4 fazemos, que foi esse simpósio sobre preservação do documentário na era digital. Eu queria que se você pudesse explicar um pouco o que foi discutido e, sobretudo, se algum tipo de articulação internacional quanto a isso foi iniciado a partir desse encontro do mês passado. Isso aconteceu no mês passado. Obrigado.
So if you can put the screen back up, I can talk a little bit about this. So this Documentary Preservation Summit was a co-presentation between our DocNYC Festival and the International Documentary Association. And I was trying to look at 3 things as part of this event. One is the obvious technical need to address films that need restoration, films that currently exist on old formats, whether it's film formats or video formats that are in danger of going away. And I would say when you go to an archival conference, that's what the main talk is about. And there's some very excellent archival conferences, including AMIA, the Association of Moving Image Archivists, which has a conference every November. But as filmmakers, having your work preserved is only one step. For documentary filmmakers, the second step is having the legal clearances to show those films. So we had a discussion dealing with those issues. Sometimes the legal issue is that as a filmmaker you have a distributor with an old contract and the distributor isn't doing anything with your film. What can you do with that? Sometimes there are great documentaries. For instance, the documentary series Eyes on the Prize, which is a history of the American Civil Rights Movement, which for a long time wasn't available to the public because there were so many sans rights issues in that film that they couldn't be cleared. Or another one that had a very happy outcome this year, this is a photograph from it here, Marcel Foul's documentary, The Memory of Justice, from 1976. That includes some songs and footage that needed to get re-cleared, and Martin Scorsese's Film Foundation undertook that along with the Academy and other organizations. So you got technical problem, you've got legal problems, and then the third issue that we set out to address was bringing these films out into the world. What are the new possibilities for that?
Obrigada. É verdade que é muito interessante esse trabalho do Thom Powers, porque é uma abertura para toda a diversidade. Eu já ouvi falar de pessoas que querem fazer festivais online, e eu estou muito curiosa de ver o que isso vai dar, e ao mesmo tempo eu concordo com a Ali que não há nada melhor do que esse encontro na frente de uma tela para partilhar um filme. Eu vou passar então a palavra para vocês aproveitarem que a gente tem aqui os exímios convidados para fazerem perguntas.
Oi, eu gostaria de ouvir um pouquinho quais são os critérios de escolha na hora de selecionar os trabalhos.
Well, that is an excellent question that gets right to the heart of the matter. For a festival like Toronto, we're always looking for a balance of material. So we're looking for a balance of kind of heavy material with lighter material. We're looking for a balance of experienced filmmakers with newcomer filmmakers. We're looking for an international balance. I would say the number one thing that I'm looking for is to be surprised. And when you watch several hundred documentaries a year like I do, it gets harder and harder to be surprised. And sometimes that surprise comes from having a subject matter that I just knew nothing about revealed to me. Sometimes it's a subject matter that I felt I knew a lot about, but here's an approach to it that I had never considered before. So I think surprise is the main thing I look for.
I think, well, it's about the same for me. Of course, a balance between form and content as well. And sometimes that's really difficult, of course. It's not always the case. Sometimes the content is more important than the form. Sometimes it's the other ways around. But the best films, I think, is where the content of what the director wants to tell is entangled, how you call it, with the form, or that the form is so difficult to explain this in English. But okay, and then of course internationally, we do not want to show only Western films. That is very, very important. We show a lot of films from developing countries. You know, the Dutch are famous for their documentaries, and we used to travel the whole world and go to our former colonies and go to Africa and Asia and tell the stories of the people living there. And we rather show the films or the stories told by the people living in the countries themselves. So we have a lot of films from developing countries. And I do think, and maybe you might agree with me, but I discovered that it's also important to have not only male directors. I do think that gender is important as well. I didn't used to look at if the director was a male or female, but lately I do, because it's important. I noticed last year we did a program called The Female Gaze. We invited a lot of famous female directors to come to Amsterdam from all over the world. And then I decided also for the first time that every jury should have more women in the jury than men. And really the prizes for the first time went to more women than men. So I think it's important. To be surprised is so important, or that there is different angle on the same story. You know, every year I think I don't want to show any more films about the Holocaust. I've really fed up with the Holocaust. We had so many wars after the Holocaust. Look at former Yugoslavia, Rwanda. But you know, every year there's one film or maybe two films that are so interesting and it gives a different story or a different angle to the story we all know, that I still am tempted to show the film. So, yeah, and we strongly believe in good cinematography, whatever it means.
Criteria. It's hard to say. We are in our regulation. We define the documentary means if the filmmaker thinks or believe this is documentary, we accept all works. So we always try to explore a new definition of documentary. And then, as two of you mentioned, the surprise is very important, also new challenge. So it's, this is those documentary we are looking for. And then I think now it's many festivals try to get some new names or fresh works for the international competition. But we are also appreciated to show the films by veteran filmmakers in the international competition, because if it's those works are very new challenge, it's also it means a great film in the international competition. Yeah, and I like to add some explanation about equipment or technology. Last question. I was just thinking why we couldn't choose DCP, because as I mentioned, after the screening, we will preserve the materials in the film archive, a documentary archive in Yamagata, and then we will run a local theater or public screening all over Japan. And most of the spaces are, very small places, only for 50 people, or a cafe, or blah, blah, blah. So they can't play DCP, of course. So that's one of the reasons. Also, we make Japanese subtitles. So it's very complicated to insert Japanese subtitles in the DCP, but now we try to fix for the next edition, because we can't escape from that problem. Yeah.
Meu nome é Felipe, eu sou realizador independente de documentário, e a minha pergunta vai um pouco nesse sentido de uma preocupação que eu tenho tido, que é com relação aos submissions fees, né? As taxas de inscrição para os festivais. Porque, por exemplo, para mim, a minha última realização que eu fiz de longa-metragem foi um filme que eu produzi com R$20.000, e assim, só para distribuição eu já gastei mais de R$1.000. E aí acaba ficando um pouco nessa questão de que às vezes você quer mandar para todos os festivais, só que eu, como um realizador independente, e também não sou estudante, então eu já passei, porque, claro, para estudantes geralmente tem essa facilidade maior, então eu estou nesse limbo entre uma pessoa que está começando e ainda não tem recurso suficiente. Então, às vezes esses submissions fees acabam sendo uma barreira para eu chegar até alguns festivais. No caso desses maiores, eu acabo tendo e não só eu, isso é uma questão que eu discuto com vários outros amigos meus e tal, que também estão na mesma situação, a gente acaba optando por não enviar, porque a gente sabe que a competição é muito grande, então a gente acaba indo para festivais menores e tal. Então a minha pergunta é mais nesse sentido, assim, porque vocês falaram agora da questão da surpresa, né? Será que talvez se você abre mais para, que nem o É Tudo Verdade aqui, ele não tem uma taxa de inscrição, então ele está mais aberto a receber esse tipo de produção que está fora um pouco, né, e que pode trazer essa surpresa e trazer uma outra estética, uma outra, não sei, um novo pensamento para isso.
I understand your problem, of course. On the other hand, I do think that when you make a budget for your film, this should be included, the marketing of the film and how to... Don't forget, in Amsterdam, it's expensive to organize a festival. There are 16 people who see the film. We have to pay them. We rent cinemas. We have to... it's a lot. It's not easy. I mean, for you to, if you have to rent a cinema yourself to show a film, it's much more expensive than the $30 you pay for IDFA. It's not a lot of money. Usually for developing countries, we don't let them pay and we don't let students pay. So, but I'm sorry, it's part of the deal. And when you make a film, I think it should be part of your budget. It's not only the making of the film, it's also what's coming after the film, when it's finished. The distribution, you want your film to be shown in Amsterdam. Brazil is not a developing country anymore, and I do know that Berlin is much more expensive. For us it's $30, but there are like 16 people watching your film, judging your film. That takes them 1.5 hours to see the film and to make a description, and if necessary you get an answer why you're not accepted, or they have to write a report. You know, it's not only that we are doing this, if we are not a philanthropical institute. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, but you know, but for students it's free, and for directors of developing countries we also make exception, not for Brazil. No, but if you call, and sometimes when it's really necessary, and when somebody calls or we get somebody on the telephone, we might make an exception. But to be honest, we don't do that very often, because you're right, there are 3,500 people submitting their films, and that's months and months of work. And we love the work at the same time, so, but please feel free to send it for $30, come on. They just stole me on the Copacabana from $7,000, yeah, on the credit card.
Ou então tira a nacionalidade equatoriana.
I gave a lot back already.
But actually, we don't charge any entry fee, because as one of the reasons you mentioned, that we like to open for everyone, and also we started in 1989, and no Asian film, because they don't have any budget to make films, and only European, American people came to Asia and shot the film, but we like to, you know, endorse the Asian filmmakers at that time, so we like to keep this policy as long as possible. Yeah, but it's...
That's what we tried as well. We only started like 3 or 4 years ago with asking a fee, but in the end it's just too expensive.
Yeah, I know.
Because we get so many, when you get only 300 films or so.
Yeah.
It's okay, but it's...
Yeah, and then understand, because the advantage of the market is much bigger than Yamagata, of course, so that...
Yeah, but there's also something else. There's also something else. I do think that when you want to go to a festival like Toronto or Amsterdam or Yamagata, you also have to be very critical towards your own work. We do get films that before we had the entry fee, that we really thought, why does anybody think that this film could be accepted in our festival? Because it were some really bad movies. And then I think when directors just can send it everywhere without paying anything, then you're not very critical. And then I hope you're forced to be also critical towards your own work, in a way. I'm sorry to sound so tough, but it's a hard world out there. It really is.
Yeah.
I kind of just want to let Allie have the last word on this one, but the festivals I represent all have submission fees for the same reason that Allie describes. It's expensive to process them. I mean, the places where we will grant waivers, if your film has, if your film had played at It's All True, there's an opportunity where we probably would grant you a waiver, because at that point we kind of know that your film has been curated by a significant festival, and and we recognize, okay, well, this film probably has some merit for us to be considering it. The fees are kind of there more to be an extra hurdle for the kinds of filmmakers who probably are not going to have a good chance at our festival anyways.
É o processo que, aliás, o que ele citou de ter sido selecionado aqui não é tudo verdade, que é uma porta aberta, é como os curta-metragens que agora brasileiros que forem vencedores podem ir direto para os Oscars de curta-metragem. Então, é a porta aberta porque foi reconhecido num festival que tem, enfim, é respeitado, então já é uma porta aberta, já ajuda um pouquinho. Tem mais perguntas?
Boa tarde. Eu me chamo Eveline, sou da Mostra de Filmes Solidários. Dialogando com a pergunta dele e também propondo um diálogo entre os grandes festivais e os festivais do Sul, digamos assim, né? Se há a probabilidade de não só serem enviados pelos diretores, mas se há a probabilidade dos festivais consultarem os festivais do Sul para também selecionar alguma coisa a partir de uma pré-seleção já feita por aqui. Se existe esse formato de seleção ou não. Se a demanda de filmes para vocês é só de quem envia, ou se vocês consultam outros festivais também para uma seleção proativa.
No, I would say that there's a constant dialogue that's taking place, between all of us about the films we're seeing. And I mean, I think it's especially important for you to know that there's a dialogue that takes place of recommendations between films that we can't show at our festivals. Sometimes even more so. If there's a film that isn't going to make one of the very limited slots at Toronto, I always want to give that film another chance somewhere else, and I'm inevitably sending lists to my colleagues at other festivals. Hey, here are the 10 films that I wish I could have shown at Toronto this year. You should take a look at them. Once a year I'll check in with Amir Labaki and say, what are the more interesting films coming out of Brazil this year, and those kinds of dialogues are taking place constantly. I do, just because I know we're running out of time, I just want to highlight a few other places where you can go to for resources. One of them is the website Stranger Than Fiction, which is a website and a screening series in New York City that my wife and I run. And on this website at stfdocs.com, every Monday, we publish something called the Monday Memo, which is a roundup of kind of what's happening in the documentary world, with lots of links to other articles. It's written by this guy, Jordan Smith, who just returned from his honeymoon, as pictured here. But I encourage you to check out the Monday Memo every week. And then also, if you don't know, dword.com, this is an international online chat site for documentary filmmakers. You can if you are a documentary filmmaker and can demonstrate your credits, you can register for free, and it's a really fantastic place to go and have dialogues with other filmmakers from around the world about all kinds of questions, from making films to festivals to distribution. And so on. And then I would just point out my Twitter feed, where I'm, anything that I'm kind of aware of as far as articles in the documentary world, I'm putting out there, so that's something you can follow. There we go, that's my Miami look.
Eu tenho duas perguntas. Uma, a Ali comentou que o Brasil já não faz parte mais, não pode aplicar no fundo, no Berta Fundo, porque somos um país não subdesenvolvido, assim como México, Argentina e Chile também não podem aplicar. E eu queria saber, sobre essa surpresa de receber, ao mesmo tempo me dá a impressão que os filmes escolhidos desses países são ainda os filmes que lidam com a pobreza e com questões de terceiro mundo. Queria saber isso, o quanto conta de surpresa, né? Porque eu vejo poucos filmes desses lugares que não estão ligados, nos festivais, que não estão ligados a esse tipo de questão ainda terceiro-mundista. Outra coisa que eu queria perguntar, rapidinho, e o quanto os sales agents são importantes nessa decisão, e quanto a gente pode ser ajudado por eles, ou é só uma questão de enviar e no meio de 3.000 filmes, tentar a sorte?
First question, no, I don't think that's true. By the way, it's not my choice that Brazil is not a developing country. There's a list, it's called the DUC list. It's on our website, you can find it there. And it's done by the government, so it's worldwide. You have the high income countries, middle income, low income, and then the lowest, you know, so yeah. But for example, the film from Chile that's here, Tea Time, that we also supported with our IDFA Bertha fund, it's nothing to do with poor people. Films about soccer from Mexico, nothing to do with poverty. Of course, there are films about poverty, because that's also, let's be honest, one of the biggest issues nowadays in our world, the big bridge between rich and the have and the have-nots, as I would say. And that also that the countries where there is no middle class, where you only have poverty or extremely rich people. I think also Brazil is developing much more a middle class than 20 years ago, than it was 20 years ago. And what was your last question again?
And I would just add in that, like, you don't know how desperate us programmers are for films that are entertaining. You know, a funny film, a film about music. You know, when I receive a DVD that, you know, looks like it's got a funny title, like, I save that like a diabetic saves his last piece of chocolate. Just like, you know, here are the 50 depressing films I have to watch this week, and here's the one that looks like it might be entertaining. You know, please be good.
Yeah. It's also about good storytelling, just as Thom said. And sometimes as a programmer, you have the feeling that you have the weight of the whole world on your shoulders, and really that's not fun. So we also love entertaining documentaries, but of course, documentaries also about documenting what's happening in this world. And it's not everything hallelujah here, it's not everything is so funny.
Não, só um adendo que não é só os filmes sociais, porque a gente, enfim, eu produzi um filme ano passado que a gente teve a sorte, o privilégio de ser selecionado para o IDFA, que é um documentário musical sobre Dominguinhos, que, enfim, então, acho que é o que eles estão dizendo.
Great film.
Porque tem uma secção musical. You have a musical section. Yeah. Tem uma secção musical no festival.
Also to have some fun, you know. That's also one of the reasons why we started the musical section, because you need some light in this world, and music helps.
Bom, então, thank you very much. Muito obrigada a vocês. Eu acho que provou que um festival... A vossa presença provou que, digamos que os critérios também para a existência de um festival, não só a surpresa que a dramaturgia de um filme pode trazer, mas também, como eu disse no início, o encontro que ele proporciona. Eu penso que isso é único, e é por isso que eu fiz umas perguntas sobre o online, que eu acho fantástico, mas ao mesmo tempo a gente tem que defender a existência dos festivais, porque é verdade que custa muito caro. É difícil de organizar, e a gente tem muita sorte que aqui no Brasil tem esse tudo verdade. O Amir não está aqui para ouvir, e que a gente só pode desejar feliz aniversário e muitos mais pela frente para a gente poder se encontrar de novo. Muito obrigada.